I still remember the way the air in that clubhouse changed. It wasn't the autumn chill of Halloween or the smell of pumpkin spice. It was the pressure. That specific stillness right before something breaks. After 30 years as a structural engineer, 5 of which I spent personally designing and supervising the construction of that very clubhouse, I'd learned to read structural stress the way some men read tides. Something was about to go terribly wrong. The forecast, so to speak, was for the biggest Halloween party the neighborhood had ever seen. But the Cypress Creek Clubhouse was not built to handle that kind of weight, especially not the second-floor balcony. It had been designed as a social hub, but it now looked like an impending disaster. I had designed that balcony for a live load, a few people, some chairs, cocktails. I had not designed it for a heavy, dead load, meaning massive, static storage. But Karen, our HOA president, had other plans. I pulled the original blueprints, ran a few quick calculations on my laptop, and compiled a 3-page report. This wasn't a hunch, it was data. It showed pounds per square foot calculations and structural integrity warnings. I tucked the file under my arm and walked straight to her office. She was at her desk, arranging plastic pumpkins and cotton cobwebs. She glanced up, squinting like I'd interrupted something sacred. "Yes, Thomas." Her voice was, as always, lacquered with sweet condescension. "We need to talk about the balcony," I said. Karen sighed. I ran the load calculations. The party supplies you've ordered exceed its design limit. If you put a DJ system and 20 people on it, it could fail. She laughed. Not a chuckle, but an outright laugh that bounced off the clean laminate floors, as if I'd told a cheap joke. "Oh, Thomas, why are you always the party pooper?" she chirped. "For God's sake, it's just some hay bales and plastic ghosts. The building isn't going to collapse." I pushed the report forward. "This isn't a hunch, Karen. I designed this building. Its load capacity is 150 pounds per square foot. You are putting 300 pounds on it." "I am not moving the supplies," she said, her tone dropping like a steel door. "I will not ruin my haunted balcony theme just because you're having another feeling. I have real work to do." She waved her fingers toward the door and was already turning back to her laptop, probably composing an email for the best costume contest. I left the file and the blueprints on her desk. By that afternoon, I got an email from the HOA board. "Mr. Thomas, please refrain from interfering with the Halloween party preparations or spreading unnecessary hysteria in the community. The board has full confidence in its planning." Hysteria? I had spent my entire life making sure buildings were safe. Now I was being treated like a neighborhood crank. But the worst part was how Karen turned it into theater. The next morning, she was at the community pool with a few other residents. She saw me walk by and called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, everybody be careful. Thomas thinks the clubhouse is about to collapse." Polite, nervous laughter trickled from her audience. I ignored them and walked back inside. If they wanted to ignore the warning, fine. But I wasn't going to sit idle. I gathered all my calculations, copies of the original blueprints, and my email chain with Karen. I took my professional camera and took time-stamped photos of the balcony, now visibly loaded with thousands of pounds of decorations. I backed everything up to a thumb drive and locked it in my fireproof box. And that night, I emailed the entire file to the HOA's insurance company. I clicked send, and the little whoosh sound from my computer felt strangely final. I stared at the sent confirmation in my outbox for a long time. There was no satisfaction in it. No feeling of, I got her. Just a cold, heavy certainty. I need you to understand, this wasn't some petty, tit-for-tat neighborhood squabble. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of preservation. I hadn't sent that email to get Karen in trouble. I sent it to document the truth before her obsession got someone seriously hurt. I was creating a paper trail that couldn't be ignored, a record of a warning that had been officially and arrogantly dismissed. You see, this wasn't just about a building. It was about my building. Let me back up. My name is Thomas. I'm a structural engineer. Or at least I was. I'm retired now. For 30 years, my entire world revolved around things like tensile strength, load capacity, and the invisible forces that keep us all from falling through the floor. I believe in things that are built to last. I believe in good foundations, in steel rebar, in mathematics. I believe that physics doesn't care about your feelings, your budget, or your party planning schedule. When my wife, Clara, and I decided to retire, we chose Cypress Creek for a reason. It was new, it was clean, and it was peaceful. The developer hadn't just thrown up cheap townhomes. They had invested. The lawns were green, the lake was clean, and the centerpiece of it all was the clubhouse. It was a beautiful, two-story modern rustic building. It had a wraparound porch, a community hall with a vaulted ceiling, and a stunning second-floor balcony that overlooked the lake. It was the heart of the neighborhood. It's where we held potlucks, where the book club met, where we all gathered to watch the game. And I loved it. I loved it because I designed it. 20 years ago, I wasn't retired. I was the lead engineer for the firm that got the Cypress Creek contract. That clubhouse, that was my last big project before I started my own consultancy. My signature is on the original, city-filed blueprints. I knew every single beam. I had personally calculated the wind shear tolerance on the roof. I had hand-picked the specific grade of steel I-beams that supported that second-floor balcony. I designed that balcony to be a place of quiet enjoyment. I designed it for a live load, which in engineering terms means people walking around. I rated it for a dozen people, maybe 15, enjoying a sunset, holding a cocktail. I did not design it to be a commercial storage unit. I did not design it to hold thousands of pounds of static, dead load, weight. I knew, with mathematical certainty, exactly how much it could hold. And I knew Karen was about to push it past its breaking point. Which brings me to Karen. Karen was not elected to the HOA board for her wisdom, her judgment, or her experience in, well, anything. She was elected for her energy. She was one of those people who mistakes being busy with being productive. She wore sharp blazers, had perfectly helmeted blonde hair, and carried a clipboard like a weapon of mass destruction. To Karen, the HOA wasn't a service to the community. It was a stage for her to perform on. Her entire reign was based on appearance. She launched a war on beige, forcing 24 homeowners to repaint their front doors community-approved shades of forest green or burgundy. She spent $15,000 of our dues on a new, more prestigious fountain for the front gate. She measured the precise, allowable height of lawn gnomes. Her world was all surface, no substance. And her entire year, her entire identity, revolved around one single, solitary event, the annual Cypress Creek Halloween Gala. This wasn't just a party to her. It was a production. It was her Super Bowl. It was her one chance to prove to our neighborhood, and more importantly, to the other rival neighborhoods, that she was the queen of social events. She would spend months planning the theme, the catering, the lighting. The entire community Facebook page would be flooded with her sneak peeks. And this year, the theme was the haunted balcony. She had decided that the entire party, the DJ, the bar, the sound system, the scares, all of it, would be centered on that second-story balcony. I'm sure, in her mind, it was a grand vision. In my mind, the mind of the man who had personally signed off on the blueprints, it was a structural failure in progress. I've been wondering, have you ever dealt with a person like that? Someone in a position of power who cared more about how things looked than whether they were actually safe? Let me know in the comments. So, when I first saw the maintenance crew hauling pallets of solid wood fake coffins and life-sized, heavy-based animatronic ghouls up those stairs, I knew I had to step in. I wasn't just a cranky neighbor. I was, quite literally, the only person who knew exactly what that building could, and more importantly, couldn't handle. Which is why I sent that first, polite email. The one where I attached the original blueprints. The one she and the board laughed at and dismissed as alarmist hysteria. They had no idea. They thought I was just a cranky old man, afraid of a few pumpkins. They forgot. I was the man who knew exactly how many pumpkins it would take to bring the whole thing crashing down. That magic number, as it turns out, was being put to the test starting exactly 1 week before the party. I was on my morning walk, coffee in hand, just enjoying the cool October air, when I saw the first delivery truck. It wasn't a small white van. It was a proper 26-foot moving truck, backed right up to the clubhouse service entrance, its hydraulic lift whining as it lowered to the pavement. I stopped. I watched. 2 men, wearing matching black t-shirts that said, "Haunts are us," were not decorating the lawn. They were hauling their inventory up the main stairs and directly onto the second-floor balcony. My engineer brain, that part of me that never really turns off, started doing the math. First, I saw them stacking hay bales? Yes, real hay bales. At least a dozen. I mentally calculated the weight. A dry bale can be 40 pounds. A bale that gets damp from the morning dew? Closer to 60. They were stacking them 3 high against the main wall of the building, the wall that connects to the balcony's ledger board. That's a few hundred pounds right there, in one of the most sensitive spots. Then came the animatronics. These weren't the cheap, plastic skeletons you buy at a hardware store. These were life-sized, heavy-based, commercial-grade robots. I saw a vampire that lurched, a werewolf that howled, a mad scientist strapped to a metal table. I could see the steel frames, the pneumatic pistons, the heavy motors at the base. At least 150 pounds each. They rolled 3 of them out and positioned them near the railing. I saw the centerpiece, the item that made my blood run cold. It was an 8-foot-long prop coffin. It took 2 men, grunting, to carry it. I could tell from the way they handled it, it wasn't hollow plastic. It was solid wood. Solid, dark-stained oak, with real brass fittings. It was a movie prop, and it had to weigh 250 pounds easy. They set it down right in the middle of the balcony. My stomach tightened. This wasn't decorations. This was storage. This was furniture. In my mind, I could practically hear the steel support bolts inside the concrete groaning. I didn't run over and yell. That's what she would do. That's not my style. I went straight home. I didn't panic. I documented. I opened my laptop, went to my personal archives, and pulled up the digital files for the clubhouse. I composed a calm, clear, and professional email. I titled it, "Urgent Query, Balcony Load Capacity at Cypress Creek Clubhouse." I wrote, "Dear Karen, I was on my walk this morning and observed the party setup in progress. I noted several significant, heavy items being placed on the second-floor balcony, specifically the numerous hay bales, the heavy-based animatronics, and the solid wood coffin prop. I kept the emotion out of it. This was about facts, not feelings. As the original design engineer for this building, I feel it is my professional duty to inform you that the balcony was not rated for this type of static, dead load. It was designed for a live load of 150 pounds per square foot, intended for foot traffic only. I wasn't attacking her. I was giving her an out. I was giving her the information to make the right choice. I am certain this is just an oversight," I typed, "but I must strongly advise you to move all heavy item-based themes to the ground floor patio. The patio is built on a concrete slab on grade and can support any weight you throw at it." Then, the most important part, I clicked the paperclip icon. I attached the original, city-stamped blueprints. I even highlighted the exact page, S5, Structural Details, Balcony. I finished the email. "Please see the attached blueprints for confirmation of the load rating. Best regards, Thomas." I hit send. It was done. It was 10:04 a.m. The warning was polite, it was professional, and it was now permanently documented. I had done my part. Her reply came back in under an hour. Just 48 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was short. It was condescending. And it was exactly what I expected. "Dearest Thomas," it began. "My name is not Dearest Thomas. Thank you so much for your concern, but I think you're being a little old-fashioned. This isn't 1990. These things are perfectly safe. We have professionals handling the setup, and they know what they're doing. It's all going to look fabulous. See you at the party. And that was it. She didn't acknowledge the blueprints. She didn't address the math. She didn't mention the 250-pound coffin. She just dismissed me. She called me old-fashioned. She was trusting a $15 an hour party setup kid over the man who designed the building. I sat there, staring at her email. This was the moment it changed. This was the fork in the road. It went from a polite warning to a serious liability. She had now been formally notified of the danger, with proof, and had provided a written refusal to act. This was no longer an opinion. This was negligence. I took a deep breath. I saved her email. I printed it out, along with my original message. I walked to my fireproof box and added them to the file I had already sent to the insurance company. I thought, okay, that's the end of it. She's made her choice. The party is in a week. What more can happen? I was wrong. The conflict wasn't over. It was just getting started. 2 days later, just 3 days before the party, I saw the other truck arrive. This one wasn't from Hans Ars. This one was from Rock My Event. They weren't hauling ghouls. They were hauling gear. I stood at my living room window and watched, in total, stunned disbelief, as they wheeled out 2 massive, 4-foot-high speaker stacks, a heavy-duty DJ mixing console, and worst of all, a stack of metal lighting trusses. They were building a stage. On top of the balcony, they were adding hundreds, maybe thousands more pounds of concentrated weight to the very structure I had just warned her about. This was no longer negligence. This was a direct, active, and immediate threat. The polite email stage was over. It was time for a face-to-face confrontation. I didn't even grab a jacket. I just snatched the rolled-up set of original blueprints from my desk, the ones I had left on her desk and gotten back in my mailbox, marked Return to Sender. This time, I wouldn't let her ignore them. I walked out my front door and down the street. It was the day of the party, just a few hours before sundown. The energy in the neighborhood was electric, chaotic. Kids were already in costume, running on the lawns. But at the clubhouse, it was pure panic. The Rock My Event truck was still there, parked on the manicured grass, leaving deep, muddy ruts. The crew, kids in their early 20s, were hustling, carrying black metal equipment. And there she was in the middle of it all. Karen. She was wearing a purple velvet witch's hat, already in costume, clipboard in hand. She was screaming into her phone, "I don't care if the fog machine is extra. I ordered it." She snapped her phone shut and saw me approaching. Her face, already flushed with stress, tightened into a mask of pure annoyance. "Thomas, what now?" she snapped. "We are extremely busy, as you can see. The party starts in 3 hours. I didn't say hello. I didn't waste time. I just pointed up to the balcony, where 2 young men were bolting together a heavy, triangular metal lighting truss. "Stop this, Karen. Now." "Excuse me," she scoffed, turning her back to me to shout at a crew member. "No, the vampire goes by the bar." "The bar?" I stepped in front of her. I forced her to look at me. "I am not asking you. I am telling you. You have to stop. That is a K-truss. It weighs 300 pounds, empty. The 2 speaker stacks you have on either side are another 100 pounds each. You've got the hay bales, the coffin, the animatronics. Karen, you are thousands of pounds over the structural limit before a single person steps foot up there." I unrolled the blueprints on the hood of a nearby golf cart, the paper crackling in the wind. I slammed my finger down on the data box. "Look," I said, my voice rising. "Section is 5, live load versus dead load. That is my signature. That is the city-approved stamp. The balcony is rated for 150 pounds per square foot. You are pushing 300, maybe more. You are going to get someone killed." I used the word killed. I wanted her to understand. This was the moment. This was the point where any sane person, any rational leader, would stop. They would look at the evidence, the actual blueprints, presented by the actual engineer, and they would stop. Karen looked at the blueprints. She looked at my finger. She looked at the frantic crew. Then she looked at me. And she didn't just get angry. She got cold. A chilling, reptilian calm washed over her. She knew she was in the wrong, and she knew I had just cornered her. So she did what all bullies do when they're cornered. She turned it into a performance. She put her hands on her hips, threw her head back, and let out a loud, theatrical laugh. "Oh my God," she shouted, turning to the setup crew and the other board members who were watching. "Everybody stop. Stop what you're doing." The crew, confused, stopped. The music test went silent. "Mr. Thomas, our neighborhood expert," she said, making air quotes with her fingers, "is here to save us. He's here to ruin the party." I just stood there, my hands still on my own blueprints. "Karen, this isn't a joke." "He thinks," she shouted over me, "he thinks a few pumpkins and some speakers are going to bring the entire clubhouse down. Can you believe it?" She gestured to the 250-pound solid oak coffin. "He's afraid of a Halloween decoration." The setup crew, a bunch of 20-year-old kids, started to laugh. They snickered, looking at me like I was just some crazy old man. "Thomas," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity, "I am so tired of this. You have been trying to sabotage this party from day one. You know why? Because you're old. And you're boring. And you can't stand to see other people having fun." The words hit me like a slap. Old and boring. "We are professionals," she said, gesturing to the kids in t-shirts. "They know what they're doing. The building is fine. The party is happening." She stepped right up to me, so close I could smell the hairspray from her witch's hat. Her voice dropped to a low, venomous hiss. "You are done. Get off this property. If I see you warning my vendors or scaring my staff again, I will have you cited for trespassing." Clear. The world went quiet. I could hear the wind in the trees, the distant sound of a lawnmower, the nervous snicker from one of the crew members. I looked past Karen to the other board members, to Gary, the treasurer, who was just staring at his shoes, pretending not to see, to the other neighbors who were watching, their faces frozen, too afraid of Karen to speak up. I had been publicly, totally, and utterly humiliated. I looked down at the blueprints. My blueprints. My work. My signature. I slowly, deliberately began to roll them up. I didn't break eye contact with her. "This isn't about me being boring, Karen," I said, my voice just as quiet, just as cold. "This is about physics. And physics doesn't care about your party." I tucked the roll of blueprints under my arm. "You've been warned," I said. "You've all been warned." I turned my back on her. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just walked away. I walked past the snickering crew. I walked past the neighbors who were now pretending to check their phones. I walked past my own clubhouse. This was the point of no return. I had tried to warn her politely. I had tried to warn her professionally. I had tried to confront her directly. I had done everything I could. My hands were clean. I walked back to my house, the sound of the party setup, the music, the laughter, all fading behind me. I knew, with the certainty of a mathematical equation, what was going to happen next. I went to my office. I took out my professional camera and my best telephoto lens. I set up a tripod in my second-story window, the one that had a perfect, clear view of that balcony. I checked the battery. I cleared the memory card. I had done my part. The warning was delivered. The evidence was filed. Now, all that was left was to wait for gravity to do its job. But that wasn't quite true. Waiting was the last step. The plan came first. I sat in my office chair, the tripod standing in front of the window like a silent, three-legged soldier. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't filled with rage, not anymore. That hot, stinging humiliation from the confrontation, it had burned away, leaving something cold, hard, and clear in its place. Focus. This was no longer a neighborhood argument about a party. This was a public safety crisis. This was about gross negligence. And my job, my only job now, was to create a record. An undebatable, undeletable, legally binding record. I looked through the viewfinder of my DSLR. The telephoto lens brought the balcony so close, I could practically read the labels on the speakers. The party was set to start in less than 2 hours. The setup crew was gone. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, sharp shadows that made the scene look even more sinister. I pointed the lens not at the cheesy vampire prop, but at the structure itself. I took the first shot. Timestamp, 5:17 p.m. Photo 001. A wide shot showing the entire, grotesquely overloaded structure. The hay bales, the coffin, the lighting trusses, the massive speaker stacks. I adjusted the focus. I centered the crosshairs on the middle of the main railing. It was a long, single piece of engineered steel. From this angle, with the sun hitting it just right, I could see it. A slight curve. A sag. To the naked eye, you would miss it. You'd think it was an illusion. But to an engineer, it was a scream for help. The steel was already under so much stress that it was bending under its own weight, before a single guest had even arrived. Timestamp, 5:18 p.m. Photo 002. A tight zoom on the center of the railing. I would label it, visual deflection, sagging, in main balcony railing. Timestamp, 5:19 p.m. Photo 003. I zoomed in on the point where the balcony's ledger board connected to the clubhouse's main wall. There, in the stucco, I saw it. A hairline fracture, a spider web of cracks that I was positive had not been there last week. The bolts were being pulled. The building itself was tearing apart. I didn't just take 3 photos. I took 50. I documented every angle. I created a visual encyclopedia of Karen's arrogance. Then, I pulled the memory card and walked to my computer. Phase 2 of the plan. It wasn't enough to just have the photos. They needed context. They needed to be part of the narrative, part of the case I was building. I opened a new PDF document. Page 1. A simple, typed cover sheet. Cypress Creek Clubhouse Balcony, Structural Integrity Report. Page 2. My original, polite email to Karen from a week ago. The one where I first warned her about the hay bales and coffin. Page 3. Her snarky, dismissive reply. The one calling me old-fashioned and telling me professionals were handling it. Page 4. A high-resolution scan of the original blueprints. The S5 structural page with the 150 pound per square foot load limit circled and highlighted in bright, unmissable yellow. Page 5. A typed, factual summary of our face-to-face confrontation from just a few hours ago. On this date, at approximate 3 p.m., a verbal warning was issued directly to President Karen, her last name. The warning was ignored, and I was publicly mocked and ordered to leave the property. Page 6 through 12, the new photographs. Each one time-stamped, with a simple, factual caption. Photo 002, visible deflection, sag, in main balcony railing. Photo 003, apparent stress fracture at ledger board connection point. Photo 007, concentrated dead load from lighting and sound equipment, estimated at 1,200 pounds. I compiled it all. A single 12-page file. I named it Cypress PDF. It was the most terrifying ironclad I told you so in the world. Now for the final step. Phase 3. I opened a new email. I took a deep, steadying breath. In the to field, I typed the email address for the claims department of our HOA's insurance carrier. I'd found it in our annual disclosure documents. I always keep a copy. In the CC field, I typed the general email for the city building inspector's office. They wouldn't see it until Monday morning. But that wasn't the point. The point was to have it on their server, a server they could not delete, time-stamped before the incident. I BCC'd my lawyer. Now, the subject line. This was the most important part. It couldn't be emotional. It had to be legal. It had to be alarming. I typed, subject, imminent danger, official notice of structural overload at Cypress Creek Clubhouse, policy #774B. I even included our HOA's policy number. I wanted them to know I was not playing. The body of the email was just as cold. No, hello. No, dear sirs. Just facts. To whom it may concern. Attached, please find a 12-page file documenting a willful and ongoing violation of structural load capacity at the Cypress Creek Clubhouse. As the original design engineer of this structure, P. retired, I am notifying you that the HOA board, led by President Karen, her last name, has been repeatedly warned, in writing and verbally, of an imminent risk of structural failure. They have actively refused to comply. The structure is currently overloaded by an estimated 100 to 150% above its design limit. A public event is scheduled to begin in approximately 1 hour. I am notifying you to limit all liability and to create a formal, time-stamped record of this warning. I signed it with my name and my professional engineer designation. I attached the PDF. My mouse hovered over the send button. This was it. This was the moment the responsibility officially left my shoulders and landed directly on theirs. I was no longer just a cranky neighbor. I was a professional engineer who had just filed a formal, legal notice of imminent danger. The email was gone. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, the sun had finally set. The sky was a deep, bruised purple. And then, as if on cue, the first strains of cheesy Halloween music, the Monster Mash, began to drift across the lawn from the clubhouse. The party was starting. My work was done. I had done my duty as an engineer. I had done my part as a neighbor. I had created the evidence. I turned off my computer monitor. I left the camera on the tripod, pointed at the balcony. Now, all that was left was to wait for physics. Physics is patient, but it's also punctual. I didn't have to wait long. The party started at 7 p.m. The music was obnoxious. A thumping, pulsing bass that vibrated the glass in my office window. I sat in my dark office, just listening. Around 8:30 p.m., the noise level spiked. A roar of laughter, a wave of applause. That finally pulled me to the window. I put my eye to the viewfinder of my camera. The sin was worse than I feared. The telephoto lens cut through the darkness. The balcony wasn't just holding the equipment. It was crammed. I counted at least 25 people dancing, on top of the thousands of pounds of dead load. This wasn't a party. It was a statistical certainty. And there, in the center of it all, was Karen. She was in her vampire queen costume, high-collared cape and all, holding a wireless microphone. The music dipped. Her voice boomed across the entire neighborhood. "Welcome," she shrieked, giddy with excitement. "Welcome to the best, most epic Halloween party Cypress Creek has ever seen." The crowd cheered. She raised a plastic goblet high in the air. "They said it couldn't be done," she yelled, and I swear she looked right at my dark window. "They said it was unsafe." A few of her friends on the balcony booed and laughed at the very idea. "But I say," she screamed, building to her grand finale, "nothing is too much for Cypress Creek. Happy Hallow." She never finished the word. It wasn't a creak. It was a snap. I was still looking through the lens. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. Then a deep, tectonic groan. The sound of metal bolts, stressed past their breaking point, finally shearing off. The center of the balcony, right where I had photographed the sag, didn't just bend. It failed. Karen's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed, silent "oh" of pure animal terror. The entire thing, The people, the speakers, the coffin, the DJ, and Karen herself fell in one horrifying, tangled cascade. It crashed onto the stone patio below. A final, deafening, bone-shattering whump that shook the ground. And then, silence. The music was gone. Her voice was gone. It lasted for 3 seconds. Then the new sounds began. Screams. Deep, guttural cries of pain. Shouts of, "Oh my God," and "Help me." The clubhouse, my beautiful design, was violated. A gaping, raw wound was torn in its side. The patio below was a nightmare pit of splintered wood, tangled wires, and human bodies. I let go of the camera. My hands were perfectly steady. I picked up my phone. I dialed 911. "This is Thomas Vance at 124 Cypress Drive. There has been a major structural collapse at the clubhouse. Multiple, severe injuries. Send multiple ambulances. Now." I hung up. I didn't wait for questions. I turned back to the window. I put my eye back to the camera. It was still on the tripod, perfectly in focus. I looked at the wreckage, at the chaos, and I just started taking pictures. The aftermath. The failed ledger board. The final, terrible proof. The first distant sirens started their wail. The Halloween party was over. But the sirens wailed well into the morning. The next day, our community woke up to a new reality. The clubhouse, my beautiful design, was a disaster zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape. We soon learned that 5 people had been hospitalized with serious injuries. Karen was one of them. She had a broken leg and 2 broken ribs. The neighborhood was in a state of stunned, angry silence. But the real, final climax of the story didn't happen on the patio. It happened over email. At 10 a.m., the HOA's insurance carriers sent their reply. They instantly and completely denied the multi-million-dollar claim. Their reasoning was simple. My imminent danger email, which they received at 5:22 p.m., before the collapse, proved the HOA had been warned by a qualified expert and chose to do nothing. The HOA was now personally liable for everything. The millions in structural repairs, and the dozen lawsuits that were already being filed by the injured guests. Karen's reign was over. She was not only forced to resign in disgrace, but she was also facing criminal negligence charges from the city. My Cypress_Sky_warning.pdf, the blueprints, the emails, the time-stamped photos of the sagging balcony was no longer just my private file. It was Exhibit A for every lawyer and every news station in the state. I wasn't the old-fashioned crank. I was just the engineer who was right. It just goes to show you that physics and facts will always win against arrogance and ego. I'm curious, what's the worst case of someone ignoring an expert's advice that you've ever seen?